Miss Hanley's here to talk about Murph.
Murph is a great kid. She's really bright, but she's been having a little trouble lately. She brought this in to show the other students the section on the lunar landings.
Yeah, that's one of my old textbooks. She always loved the pictures.
It's an old federal textbook. We've replaced them with the corrected versions.
Corrected.
Explaining how the Apollo missions were fake to bankrupt the Soviet Union.
You don't believe we went to the moon?
I believe it was a brilliant piece of propaganda that the Soviets bankrupted themselves, pouring resources into rockets and other useless machines.
Useless machines.
And if we don't want a repeat of the excess and wastefulness of the 20th century, then we need to teach our kids about this planet, not tales of leaving it.
If we use our brains for 1 minute, we know that a million kinds of eyes and brains and reproductive systems and all the foods and roots and flowers, etc., could never form out of an explosion of matter. We know it. And when we use our brains for 1 minute, we know that the Earth cannot be traveling through space at 30 times the speed of a rifle bullet. We know it. When we use our brains for 1 minute, we know that mankind has been deceived by false science, using crazy mathematics into denying the creation of God. Today, contrary to the public knowledge, heliocentrism is still based entirely on assumptions. It must be assumed that the sun is stationary. It must be assumed that the Earth is spinning at 1,000 miles per hour. It must be assumed that the Earth is orbiting the sun annually at a speed of 67,000 miles per hour. It must be assumed that the Earth is tilted on an axis of 23.5 degrees. It must be assumed that the Earth's atmosphere is also rotating at 1,000 miles per hour, keeping birds, clouds, jets, and low-orbit satellites in perfect synchronization. It must be assumed that the stars do not move around the Earth, as they have been observed to do by everyone who has ever lived in all of history. It must be assumed that the reason the Earth's diametric orbit of 300 million kilometers does not produce any noticeable stellar parallax is because the stars are too many trillions of miles away. If just one of these assumptions are false, then the entire heliocentric model falls apart, and not one of them has ever been proven. Nobody has ever proven that the Earth is spinning. Nobody has ever used verifiable facts to prove any of these things. In today's culture, from the moment children are old enough to absorb information, they are inundated with imagery of heliocentrism and the solar system. From infancy, we are made to absorb the idea that heliocentrism is as self-evident as the Pacific Ocean. We are raised up into science fiction Star Trek worlds where galaxies are infinite and there is no center to any of it. We are continually reinforced with the idea that Earth is just another planet out of trillions, hurtling meaninglessly through outer space. By the time we are adults, this idea has been so thoroughly hammered into our brains that to even hint that we may stand on a motionless Earth is considered absolutely insane. There's a geocentric model that has been working just as well since the 16th century. Nobody is told that the use of a heliocentric model has been based on philosophical assertions that Earth could not possibly be the center of the universe. However, it is readily admitted by modern-day astronomers that there is no real difference between a helio and geocentric model. Here's the bottom line with Copernicism, or heliocentrism. It has nothing but flaws. Like evolutionism, there is not one true thing about it. Every claim that it makes rests on an assumption that violates an observable fact. No one has ever observed the Earth moving. No one. No test or space shot or anything else has ever shown it to move. None of them. We believe the Earth moves because there has been over 400 years of satanically motivated, increasingly sophisticated indoctrination coming forth from the science establishment telling us that it moves. No one has ever seen or felt the Earth moving at any speed. No one has ever seen the sun do anything but rise, go westward across the sky, and set. No one has ever seen the moon go eastward as it must in the Copernican system. It always rises in the east like the sun, goes westward, and sets in the west. We believe otherwise because we've been taught otherwise, just like people throughout history have believed all kinds of deceptions and called them truths.
We live in a world that has walls, and those walls have to be guarded by men with guns. Son, we live in a world that has walls, and those walls have to be guarded by men with guns.
Welcome to Space Erased.
At last.
All they had to do was show a video game animation on CNN of SEAL Team 6 going in, shooting Bin Laden, boom, it's like a video game. And people swallow it up. People buy it. People swallow it right up and go on with their lives. And go on with their comfortable lives. This is the same way NASA is operating and has been all these years.
So, the animation to your left is the path of the lunar eclipse back in 1999, brought to you by NASA. The animation to your right is the path of the lunar eclipse back in 2015. Do you notice anything odd? Well, the trajectory on the left is northwest to southeast. The trajectory on the right is southwest to northeast. This is completely opposite in more ways than one, and it surely doesn't look like an orbit around the equator where the Earth is tilted at 23.5 degrees and where the lunar orbit has an inclination of about 5 degrees. These animations here look like two completely different orbits. Now surely NASA has an animation to explain what we're seeing, and that's the problem. Everything we get from NASA is an animation, as you can see in the credits here. Animation. Think about your favorite movie for a second where they show you the Earth from quote-unquote space, like Transformers or Interstellar or Gravity or whatever. Hollywood studios didn't send a camera crew to quote-unquote space. It's all CGI. It's all animation. Just like every quote-unquote composite picture we get of the Earth from NASA. There is no live feed from the moon showing the entirety of the Earth in real time. There is no distant satellite showing us actual photographs. Everything we get is animation, CGI, or composite Photoshop, just like in the movies. The first commandment says that you shall make no image of the heavens above. So I cannot show you any images, any of the evidence of the moon or Mars or even the sun. But if you do your own research, you'll come to the conclusion that we haven't the slightest clue of what's really going on up there. We've been shown nothing more than special effects. And nobody dares to question what we've been told out of fear of being laughed at. There is no independent proof that says that anything up there is the way they say it is. Now, hearing this for the very first time is basically like hearing that 9/11 was an inside job for the very first time. You'll get those feelings of anger, denial. This is natural. And once you get over those feelings, you'll understand. And the Earth does not look like a round marble. If it did, they would show you a real picture. Well, what does it look like? Well, maybe it looks like a pear or a peanut. Nobody knows. But with that moon and its smiling face and its figure-8 orbit, well, nothing is the way they say it is. And the moon, well, it's probably not really the moon. It's smiling at you for a reason. It's doing a figure-8 orbit for a reason. And it's not just doing that by chance. Nothing here that we see is there by chance. Never forget, we didn't show up on this rock by chance. We were put here. Our DNA proves we were created. Life doesn't come from nothing. Louis Pasteur proved that 200 years ago. Life can only come from life unless intelligence created life. The world is not as it seems. Public education and indoctrination has seen to it that you've been told only what you need to know. How to operate as a sheeple. Nothing more, nothing less. Science has proven that it takes a leap of faith to believe in evolution. It is assumed that in the beginning nothing created matter. This violates the first law of thermodynamics, a principal scientific law which states matter and energy cannot be created or destroyed. After this, the matter somehow made itself expand, so it came from nothing and it makes itself expand in spite of the scientific law of inertia. Everything that has a beginning has a cause. So what has set these events in motion? evolution, the events of the Big Bang? Usually the answer is chance. Yes, chance, but chance cannot cause an event to happen. Chance refers to mathematical probabilities or odds. It cannot make anything actually occur. So it is believed that nothing created the universe, and sometime later, after nothing created the universe, evolution teaches that non-living chemicals created a living organism. This violates the scientific law of biogenesis, which states living organisms can only come from other living organisms. And despite this hurdle, it is believed this first organism also had DNA, an elegant and complex information storage system. This violates the first and second scientific laws of information. Don't people out there read books? Matter can't create non-material entities. Information is a non-material entity. Additionally, DNA needs an intricate molecular machine known as a ribosome to decode it. But the instructions to build ribosomes are on the DNA. So what came first, the DNA or the ribosome? It's way beyond the chicken and the egg. But regardless of all that, it is thought that natural selection made one-celled organisms more complex. Natural selection selects from existing information.
Why so serious?
When we see the Earth from space, we see ourselves as a whole.
A new world order. When we are successful, and we will be.
With a compelling message, one planet, one new
We opened
race.
action space. We were opening back on the Earth, anywhere else in the history of man.
We are here together, but we need to live together, with tolerance and respect. We must become global citizens.
Before us, the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order.
It is a big idea. A new world order.
For the scientist who has lived by his faith in the power of reason, the story ends like a bad dream. He has scaled the mountains of ignorance. He's about to conquer the highest peak, and as he pulls himself over the final rock, he is greeted by a band of theologians who have been sitting there for centuries.
I'll be talking in some detail about the possibility of a new world order, the quest for the new world order. New world order. The new world order really is a tool for addressing a new world.
It wasn't exactly the kind of unity that would benefit the masses, but the elite, as they would have us united under the control of a one-world government, a one-world religion, a one-world everything.
When Einstein first introduced his theory of relativity to the world, he often used the analogy of a wagon rolling along the street as an illustration. What we mean by relative motion, he stated in a Princeton University lecture, in a general sense, is perfectly plain to everyone. If we think of a wagon moving along a street, we know that it is possible to speak of the wagon at rest and the street in motion, just as well as it is to speak of the wagon in motion and the street at rest. That, however, is a very special part of the ideas involved in the principle of relativity. Gerard Hickson says, "That would be amusing if we read it in a comic paper, but when Professor Einstein says it in a lecture at Princeton University, we are expected not to laugh. That is the only difference. It is silly, but I may not dismiss the matter with that remark, and so I will answer quite seriously that it is only possible for me to speak of the street moving while the wagon remains still, and to believe it when I cast away all the experience of a lifetime and am no longer able to understand the evidence of my senses, which is insanity. Such self-deception as this is not reasoning, it is the negation of reason, which is the faculty of forming correct conclusions from things observed, judged by the light of experience. It is unworthy of our intelligence and a waste of our greatest gift, but that introduction serves very well to illustrate the kind of illusion that lies at the root of relativity. When he suggested that the street might be moving while the wagon with its wheels revolving was standing still, He was asking us to imagine that in a similar manner, the Earth we stand upon might be moving, while the stars that pass in the night stand still. It is a case of appeal, where Einstein appeals in the name of a convicted Copernican astronomy against the judgment of Michelson, Morley, Nordemeyer, physics, fact, experience, observation, and reason. On the surface, relativity may seem plausible enough, especially when presented by a charismatic character of Einstein's caliber, but is it really so simple and straightforward? In fact, Einstein's theory of relativity is so complicated and convoluted that when it first came to the public's attention, it was said that there were probably less than a dozen people on Earth capable of understanding it. Einstein's law of the constancy of the velocity of light states that light always travels at the same speed, 186,414 miles per second, or 671,900,400 miles per hour.
60% of the time, it works every time.
That doesn't make sense.
Things like the gravitational constant, the speed of light, are called the fundamental constants. Are they really constant? Well, when I got interested in this question, I tried to find out. They're given in physics handbooks. Handbooks of physics list the existing fundamental constants, tell you their value. But I wanted to see if they'd changed, so I got the old volumes of physical handbooks. I went to the Patent Office Library here in London, and they're the only place I could find that kept the old volumes. Normally people throw them away when the new values come out. They throw away the old ones. When I did this, I found that the speed of light dropped between 1928 and 1945 by about 20 kilometers per second. It's a huge drop because they're given with errors of any fractions of decimal points of error. And yet, all over the world, it dropped, and they were all getting values very similar to each other with tiny errors. Then in 1945, it went up at 48, it went up again. And then people started getting very similar values again. I was very intrigued by this, and I couldn't make sense of it, so I went to see the head of metrology at the National Physical Laboratory in Teddington. Metrology is the science in which people measure constants. And I asked him about this. I said, what do you make of this drop in the speed of light between 1928 and 1945? And he said, oh dear, he said, you've uncovered the most embarrassing episode in the history of our science. So I said, well, could the speed of light have actually dropped? And that would have amazing implications if so. He said, no, of course it couldn't have actually dropped. It's a constant. So, well then how do you explain the fact everyone was finding it going much slower during that period? Is it because they were fudging their results to get what they thought other people should be getting, and the whole thing was just produced in the minds of physicists? We don't like to use the word fudge. I said, well, what do you prefer? He said, well, we prefer to call it intellectual phase locking. So I said, well, if it was going on then, how can we be so sure it's not going on today? And that the present values are produced by intellectual phase locking. And he said, oh, we know that's not the case. I said, how do we know? He said, well, we've solved the problem. And I said, well, how? He said, well, we fixed the speed of light by definition in 1972. So I said, but it might still change. He said, yes, but we'd never know it because we defined the meter in terms of the speed of light. So the units had changed with it. So he looked very pleased about that. They'd fixed that problem. But I said, well, then what about big G, the gravitational constant known in the trade as big G? It's written with a capital G. Newton's universal gravitational constant. That's varied by more than 1.3% in recent years. And it seems to vary from place to place and from time to time. And he said, oh, well, those are just errors. And unfortunately, there are quite big errors with big G. So I said, well, what if it's really changing? I mean, perhaps it is really changing. And then I looked at how they do it. What happens is they measure it in different labs. They get different values on different days. And then they average them. And then other labs around the world do the same, and they come out usually with a rather different average. And then the International Committee on Metrology meets every 10 years or so and average the ones from labs around the world to come up with the value of big G. But what if G were actually fluctuating? What if it changed? There's already evidence, actually, that it changes throughout the day and throughout the year.
But Einstein also claims that gravity causes light to bend towards massive objects along its trajectory. If a ray of light can be said to bend, curve, or deviate from its course due to the gravitational pull of masses in its path, it must by necessity accelerate when approaching and decelerate when receding from these things. However, if light can bend under its own weight, or under the law of gravitation as Einstein claims it does, then it is not and cannot be absolute. Gerard Hickson says, strangely enough, while Einstein claims that everything is in motion and nothing is stable, he allows one thing, and one thing only, to remain outside the realm of relativity, independent of everything else. He claims that the velocity of light is constant under all circumstances, and therefore is absolute. This is a blunder of the first magnitude, but I do not imagine that he fell into it through an oversight, for it is quite evident that he was driven into this false position. He was compelled to say that the velocity of light is constant because if he did not, his new geometry would be useless. We are told that light is a material thing and that a beam of light is deflected from a straight line by the gravitation of any and everything that lies near its course as it passes within their sphere of influence. And we are further assured that light always maintains a uniform speed of 186,414 miles per second. We have, however, to remind Professor Einstein,
everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
You a piece of shit.
You don't think the moon landing is real?
No, I don't. No. Do you?
Yeah.
Why do you think the moon landing is real? Why don't you tell me why?
I saw it on television.
Oh, you're a genius. Oh, beep that. Hit that.
We'll bleep it. We'll bleep it. No, it's okay. We got
That's genius. You saw it on TV? That's awesome. I'm going to show you some CGI. I'm going to show you King Kong. I saw that on TV, too. There's an 80-foot gorilla. He's running around kidnapping white chicks. You should check it out.
You fucking cockroach.
It appears you only need basic fucking web development, Java, Linux, Microsoft, and basic video skills. Shit, I know YouTubers, amateur YouTubers who can do fucking better videos than this. I don't give a shit what kind of degree you have. You work for NASA, you a dumb motherfucker. Dumb as fuck. Because you can't be using what you learned in school to help NASA produce high-quality, believable video and photographic images. I mean, the artist renditions, we know they're fake, but some of the artist renditions look better than this bullshit. Amateur YouTubers who can do fucking better videos than this.
My best answer is, we haven't a clue. We don't know what it is. We look out in the universe and 85% of all the gravity that's out there has some mysterious unknown source. We add up all the stars, the galaxies, the planets, the comets, the black holes, the dark clouds, everything out there that we can see, touch, smell, or taste. And it doesn't add up to give us the gravity that we see operating in this universe. So really we should be calling it the dark force, because we don't know if it's made of matter. It could be a profound misnomer, sending people off in thought directions that might not really be the right path. So dark matter is just simply what we call this thing about which we know nothing, responsible for 85% of the gravity of the cosmos. We've known about dark matter since the 1930s. Back then it was called missing mass. That's what it was called, because yeah, there's got to be some mass. Where is it? We can't find it. It's got to be here somewhere, because we got the gravity. If you have the gravity, you got to have the mass. Mass and gravity go together. It's really dark gravity. Actually, we shouldn't call it anything. We should call it Fred. Something that has no meaning, because we don't know what it is to call it. But it is the longest standing unsolved problem in modern astrophysics.
Well, yeah, hold on.
Hi.
I keep seeing this symbol in the accounts from last year. It's all over the place. I don't know what it means.
That's the reason Kevin got fired. It's his magic number. He used to use it to balance his accounts. He used to call it a Keleven. He told Dwight, a mistake plus Keleven gets you home by 7. He was home by 4:45 that day.
Dark matter, dark energy. We don't know what dark matter is. It's 85% of the gravity of the universe is dark matter. It's something we don't know what it is. So we just call it dark matter. We don't know what. The universe has some pressure in the vacuum that's making it accelerate in its expansion against the wishes of gravity. We don't know what that is either. We call that dark energy. This sounds like we know something. We don't. I could call this Fred and Wilma, okay?
He used to call it a Keleven.
It doesn't matter. We are dumb stupid about what these two things are.
A mistake plus Keleven gets you home by 7.
So everything we know about the universe, what we're made of, galaxies, stars, planets, that's all right here. So according to this chart, we are 96% stupid.
He was home by 4:45 that day.
You're happy about that, apparently. I don't know what that means. You know, are you applauding my honesty? Are you applauding? You're celebrating the stupidity of our species?
It's his magic number. He used to use it to balance his accounts.
We don't know what dark matter is. It's 85% of the gravity of the universe. Is something we don't know what it is.
He used to call it a Keleven. A mistake plus Keleven gets you home by 7.
This sounds
smart, a trendsetter. Long story short, do not let people just tell you that they know the truth without any need to verify or prove it. People are liars and deceptive because we let them. You need to force NASA to prove their bullshit. No more free passes. The problem, of course, is that they won't prove it. They can't prove it. Let me explain this world of ours, because a lot of people just don't get it. The powers that be give us a choice. And that choice is to accept and believe their version of reality, or to live in doubt. And while their stories may seem crazy to many of us, they give others feelings of security and purpose. Their stories are the new gospel of the new religion of statism, or of scientism. Basically, the religion of normality. And you cannot be normal unless you believe in their gospel. And you can't just stop believing in the gospel of normality, or else you'll have to find answers to all the questions that they have already answered for us. This gospel was designed with this exact intent. What even they don't know or understand, they tell you exactly what many want to hear. They pretend as if they know. Look at shooting stars, for example. We've all seen them. They look identical to the stars in the sky, but they're flying across it. Yet we're told they're completely different. The stars in the sky are suns trillions of miles away, and the little thing flying through the sky that looks exactly like it happens to be a meteor mere hundreds of miles away. Now, you can go ask your friends about it, but they'll just laugh at you. You can tell your parents, but they might have you locked up because you're insane. You don't believe the things that the indoctrinated masses do. You aren't normal. You're crazy. You're dumb. You're out of your mind. They'll say things like, the US government can't hide a blowjob, and you think that they can hide the faking of the moon landings? No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying they have hid the impossibility of space travel, the shape of the planet you live on, about pretty much everything you've ever read in science, and the age of the Earth. On top of that, pretty much your entire idea of history. So, all that being said, don't lose your mind, but satellites in space don't exist.
Oh!
Orbits don't exist.
Oh!
It's all pretend.
Oh!
Arthur C. Clarke wrote about satellites, and then before you know it, they went from science fiction to science fact. Of course, Arthur C. Clarke was a high Freemason. No surprise there.
Just want to add a little information to what we were already talking about here, curveball. Relativity. Albert Einstein and Leopold Enfield wrote in The Evolution of Physics in 1938, "Can we formulate physical laws so that they are valid for all coordinate systems, not only those moving uniformly, but also those moving quite abruptly relative to each other? If this can be done, our difficulties will be over. We shall then be able to apply the laws of nature to any coordinate system. The struggle so violently in the early days of science between the views of Ptolemy, that was Earth at the center, or Copernicus, that's Sun at the center, would then be quite meaningless. Either coordinate system could be used with equal justification. The two sentences, the sun is at rest and the earth moves, or the sun moves and the earth is at rest, would simply mean two different conventions concerning two different coordinate systems. Could we build a real relativistic physics valid in all coordinate systems? The physics in which there would be no place for absolute, but only for relative motion? This is indeed possible. This goes to show you how the part earlier, I don't know if it was part 6, where I had inserted certain quotes from 1984, where they can make it seem like the stars are far away or very near. He just told you it's all relative. It's the same example Einstein used when he said the carriage was at rest and the earth moved. Yes, but it's not real. We want the truth. Look at this. The historical record in determining AU, that's the distance between the earth and the sun. Aristarchus of Samos, sun's distance 19 times further away than the moon, or about 4.5 million miles. Tycho Brahe, 5 million miles. Kepler, 15 million miles. And then Cassini, 87 million miles. Now here's the beauty about Cassini. I want to go over it with you real quick. He actually determined that the sun was at the center and not the earth, because he was able to see the difference in the size of the sun. See right here? So in the mid-1600s, Cassini attempted to measure the orbit of the sun to see whether it changed by the smaller amount predicted by Kepler or the larger amount predicted by Ptolemy. Ptolemy said the earth was at the center, okay? Kepler said, no, the sun was at the center. Anyhow, a measurement revealing the answer to this question would not reveal whether the earth moved or the sun, because Tycho's model could be changed, replacing the combination of circular motions with Keplerian ellipses, and produce exactly the same observations. But at least it would show whether the motions were better represented by Ptolemy's calculations or Kepler's. In those days, it wasn't possible to measure the distance of the sun, but presuming the size of the sun is approximately constant, Cassini could estimate relative changes in the distance by seeing how its apparent size changes. If Ptolemy's ideas were correct, the distance and the size of the sun would change by 3.4%, either way from the average amount. Whereas if Kepler's ideas were correct, the change in the distance and the apparent solar size would be only half that much. So they're trying to say they're going to see through 1 3/4% size differential. they can judge that. And he did that. Although the difference in the sizes, in the sun sizes caused by the change in the distance is obvious in the diagram above, in which the two extremes of size are placed side by side. It is small enough that it is difficult to measure at all, let alone with any accuracy required to decide whether Kepler or Ptolemy's calculations were the more accurate. However, in the city of Cassini, where he was a church, whatever, which obtained a meridian, I'll show you a better one. So, Cassini convinced the church officials to create an improved sundial meridian line at the San whatever Basilica, moving the pinhole genome that projected the sun's image up into the church's vaults 66.8 meters or 219 feet away from the meridian inscribed in the floor. The much larger image of the sun's disk projected by the camera obscura effect allowed him to measure the change in diameter of the sun's disk over the year as the Earth moved toward and then away from the sun. See, they assume that it moved. All of these are assumptions. And then he measured with the shadow, 1 3/4% different. So this is how Cassini arrived at his 87 million mile distance. Now then, they say Captain James Cook, Tahiti voyage, to view the June 3rd, 1769 Venus transit. And that is how they arrived at 95 million miles, or close enough to this 93 million, which is the accepted value today. My point is, curveball, they're trying to prove that the sun is not moving and it's the Earth that's moving. And they're doing this with their funky math. And they have to agree on certain assumptions going in. First, that the Earth is round. You just saw Cassini assuming that it moved, and that's why one of these systems was right. And if they all want to believe that it's the Earth moving, then they're going to see that. I mean, we're talking about a shadow, 1.5% he sees difference in a shadow. Okay, well, let me tell you what I can see with modern day computers and a software called AutoCAD, which you can ask any engineer. It's very, very accurate stuff. It can help you answer all kinds of trigonometry questions or geometric equations. It'll answer them for you. So we can't be confused by so-called mathematicians, because I can draw all this out. And when you use their own calculations, going back to that nice little diagram of the sun, how he saw the difference in size, when you line up the eclipse, whether it was 95 million miles or 93 million miles, I did them at both sizes, the moon does not cover the sun. There's ample part of the sun. They didn't have the math to where they did it accurate enough, and you can expose it. Another way you can know I'm right is they don't even put the AutoCAD drawing of the solar system out for everybody to use. If it's so accurate and it's a true representation of what's going on, they should put it out for everybody. You can't find it. I had to waste several hours drawing it up. See, I'm not interested in a cartoon drawing. I want an actual drawing. And I try to model what they give me with their own geometry, and it doesn't work. So, I can't model it. It's not right. Once you realize that, then it becomes clear when you read the facts in front of you. They don't hide it from you. You just have to read it for what it is, and you understand the facts. So let me show it to you. Look here at the little thing. Aquarius constellation, distant fixed stars. First, we have to assume they're distant, okay? That's the first assumption they're making in their calculation with this one. So this guy calculated from Paris to Syene. You got apparent parallax, right? That way he knew the distance. They're assuming the Earth is a ball, so they're tunneling through from Paris to Syene. That distance would be that far, and that was the parallax they should see. And it comes up at 9.5 inches that it should deviate from one place to the other. So they have an opportunity later when Mercury transits, or no, Venus transits the Sun, to check the parallax with Captain Cook, the sailor, the lieutenant, and this royal astronomer, Mr. Green. So they sail over to Tahiti to conduct their experiment. So they can accurately calculate the distance from the Earth to the Sun. And look how they show you 8 years and counting. We're still up there on Mars. Reinforce this idea here that they're telling me here of this parallax that they saw between Venus and the Sun, right? Venus angle of parallax. I'm going to tell you they did it with some fictitious satellite in 2006, the SOHO. But let's go back to 1792. Remember, they keep changing their distance. It started off at 3 million miles from the Earth to the Sun. And then Cassini, he got it close, and now we're up to Captain Cook. Captain Cook and his Mr. Green doing their Tahiti. Charles Green, transit of Venus. And look here again, assuming AB is the Earth's radius. They're basically saying, assuming the Earth to be a ball with that diameter, right? We're assuming it's a ball to begin with. So they're going to make their math come out because they've assumed it to be a ball. But look here, the case of the Tahiti voyage of Captain Cook and Charles Green in 1769 in the transit of Venus. Contrary to Cassini and Picard and Riker of 100 years earlier in 1672, there were no obvious baseline or tunnel. So, look here, the problem is there seems to be no direct discernible amount for the Venus parallax in available Cook-Green Venus transit data. So they didn't find anything, is what they're saying. They didn't find any deviation. So what they did, they said, screw it, we're going to go with this guy that already measured it. We're going to assume that it's correct. You check all this out for yourself. So they measured, they had no parallax, but they used this guy's numbers that he had already calculated into the solar parallax angle, Venus parallax angle, solar parallax angle. They just went ahead and used the 9 inches anyway, even though their experiment showed none. They used it anyway, came up with their numbers. So you had assumption upon assumption upon assumption. And even though they experimented with Captain Cook, they found no deviation. They used their number anyway to make it come out. And that's what they use today. A little bit less, 95, 93. Even though 95 would come closer to covering the sun on an eclipse with the moon at 2,100 and something miles in diameter. But really it should be further out than that to actually get a solar eclipse, a total eclipse.
Hey, sir! In sacred traditions, the heavens and the earth were linked, and so what was happening above was intimately linked to what was happening below. This astronomical alignment of the December 21st solstice sun rising in the center of the dark rift of the Milky Way has a whole new added weight when the geocentricity of our Earth is taken into serious consideration. The ability to track and calculate perfectly vast cycles of time, thousands upon thousands of years, makes a whole lot more sense when you understand that the Earth below you is stationary. We all must stop for a moment and take note of what is currently happening within the psychic weather of our time. Say what you will, the fact is there's a great awakening happening right now in mankind's collective consciousness. Masses of people, in an almost desperate attempt to find answers to the world around them, are starting to shun their long-held faith in belief structures, operating systems, and organizations they have been born and raised into. Mankind is once again coming to know himself and the world around him. Within even the last 15 to 20 years, especially with the creation of the internet, millions upon millions of people are now exploring the occult sciences like never before. Even within the last 5 years of my life, I have seen an enormous upsurge of interest in subjects like lost civilizations, alchemy, sacred geometry, Kabbalah, mythology, archaeoastronomy, astrology, conspiracy, secret societies, symbolism. The list goes on and on and on. We live in an age where the esoteric arts are starting to take center stage in people's explorations, investigations, and examinations of the world they live in. This awakening is something that has been ramping up for quite some time now. And this shift that is happening right now, at least according to the unparalleled mathematical and astronomical minds of the Mayans, was calculated a very long time ago and was written in the stars.
Stir the shitstorm. Hope to reach a point of critical mass that'll start a chain reaction of people coming forward. Then the government will crack. Remember, fundamentally, people are suckers for the truth. And the truth is on your side, Bubba.
Today, through the power of the internet and through the widespread dissemination of information, we now have average, everyday Jack and Jills, people not constrained by paradigms and politics, not shackled by the stale and lifeless institutions supposedly dedicated to the pure pursuit of science. Average, everyday people going out into the world, making real discoveries, finding real knowledge, and bringing it back to the people. These people are doing grassroots work, obtaining knowledge through self-pursuit, through their own blood, sweat, and tears, and sharing the lessons they have learned along the way. We live in a unique time. A person, by simply spending 1 or 2 weekends solidly perusing the right videos and channels on YouTube, may be exposed to more information in those weekends than many have procured across several lifetimes. Though we must as well be surgically discerning when it comes to the information that we gather and trust, the ability to learn has never been greater.
There was an air of, I don't know, make-believe in the Pentagon and CIA. But there was something deeper, uglier.
The astrolabe is an ancient astronomical computer that has many uses, including, as told to us by Wikipedia, locating and predicting the positions of the sun, moon, planets, and stars, determining local time, giving local latitude, and vice versa, surveying, and triangulation. The astrolabe was used during classical antiquity, the Islamic Golden Age, the European Middle Ages, and the Renaissance for all of these purposes. The early astrolabe was supposedly invented by Apollonius of Pergam around 220 BCE, which means that the astrolabe has been prevalent throughout history for over 2,000 years. Astrolabes can be purchased or built today and can be used with precision on our modern night skies. We are going to watch a brief clip from a video given at a TED conference about the astrolabe, its history, uses, and functionality. You can find the complete video on the official TED Talk site, and I would highly recommend watching the video in its entirety.
So an astrolabe is relatively unknown in today's world, but at the time, in the 13th century, it was the gadget of the day. It was the world's first popular computer, and it was a device that, in fact, is a model of the sky. So the different parts of the astrolabe in this particular type, the rete corresponds to the position of the stars, the plate corresponds to a coordinate system, and the mater has some scales and puts it all together. If you were an educated child, you would know how to not only use the astrolabe, you would also know how to make an astrolabe. And we know this because the first treatise on the astrolabe, the first technical manual in the English language, was written by Geoffrey Chaucer. Yes, that Geoffrey Chaucer in 1391 to his little Lewis, his 11-year-old son. And in this book, little Lewis would know the big idea. And the central idea that makes this computer work is this thing called stereographic projection. And basically the concept is, how do you represent the three-dimensional image of the night sky that surrounds us onto a flat, portable two-dimensional surface? The idea is actually relatively simple. Imagine that the Earth is at the center of the universe, and surrounding it is the sky projected onto a sphere. Each point on the surface of the sphere is mapped through the bottom pole onto a flat surface where it's then recorded. So the North Star corresponds to the center of the device. The ecliptic, which is the path of the sun, moon, and planets, correspond to an offset circle. The bright stars correspond to little daggers on the rete, and the altitude corresponds to the plate system. Now, the real genius of the astrolabe is not just the projection. The real genius is that it brings together two coordinate systems so they fit perfectly. There's the position of the sun, moon, and planets on the movable rete, and then there's their location on the sky as seen from a certain latitude on the back plate. So that's just one use. It's incredible. There's probably 350, 400 uses. In fact, there's a text that has over 1,000 uses of this first computer. On the back, there's scales and measurements for terrestrial navigation. You can survey with it. The city of Baghdad was surveyed with it. It could be used for calculating mathematical equations of all different types, and it would take a full university course to illustrate it.
The astrolabe is a computer, a calculator, a perfect measuring mechanism based on a geocentric, stationary model of the Earth. This piece of artistic and scientific brilliance needs no accolade, nor pomp or circumstance to announce its own craftsmanship, for its modern-day workability itself proves the genius of its design. A very profound question we must ask ourselves is, if the Sun is traveling at roughly 500,000 miles an hour, and the Earth rotates around it at roughly 66,000 miles an hour, how is it even possible to map and track the same set of stars for thousands of years? If we are to assume that the ancients created this calculator with a complete lack of understanding the true heliocentricity of our solar system, and merely created this calculator of the heavens as understood from their perspective and viewpoint, how is it possible they could have crafted such an instrument that maintains such precision over thousands of years? To somehow think that an instrument of such a high and accurate degree of calculability merely works today out of dumb luck or by accident is rather obtuse. Whoever created this instrument, whatever culture or person made it, their knowledge and ingenuity has withstood the test of time. It would seem that the heavens and the working of its cycles have been known and measurable for a very, very long time.
In 1983, a man came into the museum. He was a collector of astrolabes. He bought this from a dealer, we think, in the Lebanon. We believe we can date this instrument to about 520 AD. That makes it the second oldest geared instrument that we know of after the Antikythera mechanism. The gears in the back connect to this wheel, which shows the phase of the moon. That's new moon, the waxing crescent.
So it's likely that the ancient Greek knowledge of gearing was kept alive in the Byzantine world and then by the Arabs.
An ancient Greek scientist had done a truly remarkable thing. He'd found a way of using bronze gear wheels to track the complex movements of the moon and probably all the planets as well. It was a mechanism of truly staggering genius.
This is the story of the world's first computer.
When the wheels are like this, and the pin is at the inside of the slot, the driven wheel on top is going fast. When we come round here, and the pin has moved to the outside of the slot, the driven wheel is going slow. And this is modelling the way that the moon's speed in the sky actually varies.
But when Wright originally found the pin and slot device, he failed to understand what it was for. The computer predicted eclipses through the Saros dial on the lower back of the mechanism. It was dependent upon gear wheels following the repeating cycles of the moon. But there was a new puzzle. The team knew that the moon moves round the Earth in an elliptical motion. That means it moves fastest when it's closest to Earth and slower when it's furthest away. How could the mechanism's designer possibly make gears that tracked this fluctuating path of the moon?
Michael Wright made an absolutely brilliant observation from his X-rays. He discovered that one of the gears at the back of the mechanism, mounted on this large 223-tooth gear, had a pin on it.
This is the pin and slot mechanism. There's a wheel in the back of the instrument. You can see with the naked eye that it's got some sort of a slot in it. The next thing you see is this round ghost in the slot. There is a pin.
Now you might think, well, they'll just turn together and that's a completely useless device. But he made this other very critical discovery. He discovered that the gear with the pin turns on a slightly different axis than the gear with the slot. So this mechanical device induces a variability in the motion of one of the gears.
And amazingly, the pin and slot device built into the mechanism plotted the variable motion of the moon. Could Michael Wright's complex planetarium on the front of the mechanism be simplified to match the design genius of the original?
I'm going to start off just by passing around some pretty pictures, and then I'll explain why I'm passing them. These are medieval pictures showing the cosmos, but the way that it's shown is an ancient Greek way. What you have is the Earth at the center, and you have a set of rings which are supposed to be spherical shells in which each of the planets going from the moon out to Saturn are. The front display must have been a picture like these medieval ones that showed the cosmos in cross-section. This is a picture that I did from the tomography. It's composite from several different layers so that we get a big chunk of the back cover inscription all together. And the part that I'm passing around is describing the planets. Venus's name is there, but probably all 5 are there. And they are in the order that these pictures show, going from the moon and then Mercury, Venus, in the order going away from the Earth to the stars. And then right after that, you get a line that says, and beside the cosmos is, and the text cuts off.
Well, that's a real question, isn't it? Why? The how and the who is just scenery for the public.
If I say that the world is round and someone else says it's flat, that's worth reporting. But you might also want to report on a bunch of scientific evidence that seems to support the notion that the world is round. A bunch of scientific evidence that seems to support the notion that the world is round.
$3 billion per year to operate. Damn.
Do we have proof that gravity actually exists? Well, I was watching this video here with Eric Verlinde. Gravity doesn't exist. This man here, he is a theoretical physicist, and he basically goes through the various theories, Newton's theory and Einstein's theory, and shows you how actually it's an assumption that 2 bodies, 2 masses attract one another. And this is something that hasn't been actually proven. It's a simple explanation to a complex thing. You know, with Newton's law, it was, presented more simply than Einstein's. Einstein's had to also do with time being bent. But, everybody's pretty much accepted this theory that it's works this way, where it's 2 large masses, and that this gravitational force is so small that it requires large masses for them to attract one another. And this is how we understand the heliocentric model of our universe, that spherical objects rotate around one another due to gravity pulling them inward towards the object. So, this is how we understand the moon, revolving around the Earth and the Earth revolving around the Sun, and etc., etc. But the thing is we don't really actually have proof that you know, a lot of people don't understand the facts from the theory. They don't understand that obviously we have gravity that pulls us down. This is what we describe as gravity, something that pulls us towards Earth. Now, that is a fact, but whether or not it's a law where two masses attract one another, that's the part that's a theory. That's something that hasn't actually been proven, which people don't understand this. But of course, there's different theories on why we're pulled towards Earth. With obviously the common model it's taught, you know, it's the two masses. But with guys like Nikola Tesla, he believed there's an ether that held us onto Earth. A journal entry, disproof of gravity. Okay, it's kind of interesting. Standard particle model has yet to find any evidence of gravity. This is most concerning since gravity is used by most modern equations. Great particle accelerators have hunted for any signs of gravity. None found. There are several ways to disprove gravity experimentally. And there's actually been experiments that have shown things that don't make sense if there is gravity. One simple experiment shows there is no gravity to the helium balloon. It rises. Now, is this possible? Classical mechanics shows that the force equals a constant of gravity multiplied by the mass of the object multiplied by the mass of the object 2, divided by the distance between the two masses raised by the second power. With this logic, the mass of the Earth is so great the helium balloon would have no choice but to be attracted to the Earth. But we have a mass 1 pulling on mass 2 pulling on mass 1. F1 equals F2. This is just wrong. The force of the balloon that pulls the Earth is not equal to the force that the Earth pulls on the balloon. It would not rise. Well, we see in the experiment that the helium is rising to meet its level of density. Yes, actually, he's correct in a simplistic form. Obviously, density equals mass over volume. You know, it makes sense if you understand what density is, that it would rise, but with what he's trying to get at is the simplicity of the formula of gravity doesn't correlate with density. That's what he's trying to say, actually. Okay, so what he's saying here is the theory in of itself fails altogether because it's a dimensionless mass and it's dealing with a 3D environment. So this theory actually doesn't make sense with reality, is what he's trying to get at. So he's actually postulating the whole theory is just completely, utterly wrong, not just malformed. And actually he makes sense. I mean, I don't know how you would put it into three-dimensional with the form it's already in. And in a sense what he's saying is it is completely wrong. This the impression I'm getting from his writings here. Gravity fails the multi-body test. Gravity can only compute the force between two objects. Any equation that uses a sum of objects fails in this way. First, the two objects' force is computed, then the third body is computed with the result. It's a hodgepodge theory is basically what he's saying. It doesn't actually explain anything. And you know that's why I first started to show you that theoretical physicist who is saying it doesn't exist, because it fails. You know, in design, it doesn't make sense with reality. It's two-dimensional dealing with three-dimensional. It's a two-dimensional theory dealing with three-dimensional. It's obviously incorrect. It may sort of make things make more sense, but it's actually incorrect, and it could be completely incorrect. It may have nothing to do with two masses attracting one another. We don't know. We can't test it.
What's the most you ever lost on a coin toss? Sir? The most you ever lost on a coin toss?
So I think this guy's kind of got an interesting theory, and I like this too. Silly paradoxes created by gravity. Black holes, wormholes, parallel universes, relativity, flat universe, graviton decay, Higgs boson. And actually the Higgs boson is the one that I was referring to. It might be the new ether, as they call it, because it seems to fit that pattern. The whole thing about this is that these paradoxes are made to explain away the problems with gravity, the theory of gravity. They don't actually solve anything. Einstein's theory was to explain away paradoxes in Newton's theory. You know, with some different experiments that went on. Let me go find these experiments and show you. Okay, here we go. Most scientists know about the Michelson-Morley experiment. I've covered this before. Some failed to detect any movement of the Earth around the Sun. This had to be overcome, so the Fitzgerald-Lorentz shortening of the apparatus was proposed. Let me show you the apparatus. Here is basically how it looked. These are all different mirrors, a light source. And I don't want to go through explaining the whole thing actually, because I'm trying to just go through this here.
What we've got here is failure to communicate.
Airy's failure. Telescopes have to be very slightly tilted to get the starlight going down the axis of the tube because of the Earth's speed around the Sun. Airy filled a telescope with water that greatly slowed down the speed of light inside the telescope and found that he did not have to change the angle of the telescope. Okay, so, you know, imagine you have a telescope on an angle and you're assuming that the Earth is rotating around the Sun, so the light would be coming in on an angle. Okay, assuming we're rotating around the Sun. Now imagine if the light had to go through a medium that slowed it down. If it's going slower while the Earth's rotating, but it's still really fast because it's light, but the Earth is rotating, you see how that would, you know, it would potentially hit the side inside the telescope. But matter of fact, it didn't have to be changed at all. It was as if it didn't matter, which would indicate instead that the Earth is not moving, but that the heavens are moving instead. You see? So the light, if the heavens are moving instead of the Earth, if it comes in on an angle, it's because in reality the light is being shot downwards from the heavens, but because the heavens are moving and it's being shot downwards from the heavens, it's being shot downwards like this. So it's rotating around and going down, and because of that, it wouldn't matter what medium it's going through in the telescope. It would be the same angle no matter what. And that's kind of what he's trying to indicate with that experiment. The Sagnat experiment, Sagnat rotated table complete with light and mirrors, same kind of thing. With the light being passed in opposite directions around the table between the mirrors, he detected the movement of the table by the movement of the interference fringes on the target where they were recombined. This proved that there is an ether that the light has to pass through, and this completely destroys Einstein's theory of relativity that says there is no ether. Even new science is starting to say that there's an ether or a new ether, and it goes against Einstein's theory. So it is for this reason that experiment is completely ignored by scientists. You know, it goes against establishment viewpoint on what's going on. You know, so what is the point of this? My point is that we know something pulls us towards the Earth, and what happens is people assume that because we know something pulls us towards the Earth, we understand that that's a fact, and that to question that's silly, right? It's silly to question something's pulling us towards Earth. But then people don't understand how they're assuming things about what gravity is. They assume it's two masses attracting each other, and they think it's been proven or something, but it hasn't been proven. And as far as we can tell, it could be complete bullshit.
Now go home and get your fucking shine box.
So, with that being said, when someone says there is no such thing as gravity, you shouldn't assume that they're saying, "Whoa, that what pulls you towards the Earth?" You know, it's not like that. He's actually maybe referring to what Tesla was believing. Nikola Tesla, famous scientist, go look him up. That there's an ether, you know, and that it interacts with this and keeps us or retains us on the surface of the Earth, and that maybe when you go up higher outside the atmosphere, that's why the ether is not there as much, and you start to float instead of it being gravity and you're getting farther away from a mass and then you start floating. See what I mean?
How about no, you crazy Dutch bastard?
It's why you fail.
Who in their right mind, Kevin, could possibly deny the 20th century was entirely mine? All of it, Kevin! All of it!
This video is a perfect demonstration of how important the numbers are to them. There's many people that come into my channel and say, "Oh, I agree with you in a lot of things you say, but these numbers you mention are ridiculous. I don't get it. I don't understand it." Yes, exactly. You don't get it. You don't understand it. That this is how they operate. They operate through the number system. I'm going to play this video. It's going to be crystal clear for all to see again, they're all about the numbers. Take a look.
About to break a big record tonight. Here's ABC's Gio Benitez.
They call it the Peggy Factor, Mission Control's code word for the way superstar astronaut Peggy Whitson always gets the job done.
I love it up here.
Tonight, Commander Whitson making history with her record for any American. By the time she lands in September, her tally will be 666 days in space.
Before she arrives back to Earth, 666 days. You think that's just a coincidence? Of course, it's planned. These are occultists. NASA is nothing more than an occultic organization run by the satanic government. That simple.
With more spacewalks currently 8 than any other female astronaut. She says what matters is the mission.
I'm not here because of the record, but
I'll stop right here. The so-called Peggy Whitson, the astronaut, and basically like another transgender crisis actor, like I mentioned before. These people have never been in space. They're just actors, nothing more than deceivers. And one thing I want to get into is the number game, like I mentioned so many times. While the masses see these so-called names, these so-called elite see the numbers behind the names, with Peggy being a 33 name, and Whitson being a 36, which is 3 6s. And like I mentioned before, with astronaut, which is also a play on names, with astronaut never being in space, with astronaut being 33 as well. Now let's continue on again at this point with the video. I'll back up a little bit more.
But I think having the record is important because we have to continue to progress. We have to continue to take the next step.
Whitson is perhaps a surprising interstellar star. At 9, growing up
very manly,
but extremely
manly.
She watched the moon landing and her dream was born.
Well, at the time, young girls weren't supposed to do those kinds of things.
She persevered, earning a PhD in biochem and landing a job with NASA.
Definitely very manly in these photos.
Then, overcoming the long odds. It was 10 years before...
Right here. And this is exactly what the elite love. It's basically blurred lines. You don't know if there's a man or a woman.
NASA decided she had the right stuff to become an astronaut. Her favorite thing about being in space? Simply seeing the Earth. From North Africa's red...
So fake, so phony.
...to the Caribbean blues. From...
This is all CGI. Okay, this is the purpose of course, all the so-called space missions and ISS. I mean, nothing about this is real, but you can't tell people that are in love with the whole idea of outer space. Because, again, I said it so many times, the fantasy is better than the reality, and this is all science fiction. That's all it is.
So far away.
We need to do more to be one Earth, one people.
Gio Benitez, ABC News, New York.
That's enough of that. Now I want to get into, again, the numbers game. Like I mentioned before, first name being a 33, the 3 6s, and astronaut being 33. Now, I found this very interesting with Bart Sibrels, Astronauts Gone Wild, in this interview with Apollo 12, supposed Apollo 12 astronaut Alan Bean. Take a listen to what he says here. Again, they speak in code. Take a listen.
The air conditioning. What powered the air batteries? You had a number of big batteries in the lunar module. They powered pumps. They powered the air conditioning, they powered the communication system, and that's the reason we were only able to stay on the moon 33 hours.
Stay on the moon for only 33 hours. Of course, they'd never been to the moon, never been in space, and it's just coded with their number 33. Just like when Edgar Mitchell supposedly passed away in this article. I covered this a while back, where they supposedly had the record of 3 men being on the moon for a record of 33 hours on the moon surface. Obvious for those that are awake. And again, for those that turn a blind eye to the numbers game, you don't understand how these people operate. This is their language. Until you understand that, you're not fully awake. You're only partially awake. Just like I pointed out a long time ago, this goes back to October 16, 2015. I've been making flat Earth videos since around, I would say, April, May of 2015. This one, again, particular videos, October 16, 2015. And according to science, which is nothing more than deception, of course, science and science fiction are one and the same, like I mentioned before, with the Earth supposedly 23.4 degrees on its axis. And that leaves you, of course, the occultic number, again, 66.6 degrees off being horizontal. So again, these numbers are always going to be there, just like I showed before as well. Earth is supposedly orbiting around the sun at 66,600 miles an hour. All these fabricated numbers, all based around the occult, not just the so-called ball Earth. When you look at not just NASA as well, you look at the European Agency, the nuclear, so-called nuclear research, CERN, and you see the 666 hidden in the logo. Just like, as I show many times as well, with Google Chrome, and you see the 3 6s and the flat Earth model, you see the ice ring and the oceans in the center. There's no land, but this is definitely, basically represents 666 around the world. And just another look here as well when it comes to the UN logo, which of course is basically the flat Earth model. Of course, as I mentioned as well, there just so happens to be 33 segments within the UN logo. So basically, for all the deniers of the number system that these people operate off, you're just incomplete now. You don't want to believe it. You want to believe you have some type of intelligence. In the school system, which is nothing more than the indoctrination centers throughout not only this country, throughout the world. They're all Masons that own and control not only the U.S. school system, but throughout this whole entire world, which is owned and controlled by the Satanic Masons.
Or should I say, we do not need establishment science. Or perceived authority figures, prophets of scientism, science rock stars, television celebrities, actors, comedians, jokers, professional liars, disinfo agents, Freemason fraudsters, and NASA shills to tell us that. Wake up to reality, globeheads, or go see a vestibular specialist.
But just for reference, this one PDF file, going back to 1988, August 1988, from NASA's official website once again. Let's go down to page number 6. Take a look what it says. With this report summary, this report documents the derivation and definition of a linear aircraft model for a rigid aircraft of constant mass flying over a flat, non-rotating Earth. What's the deal here with NASA doing tests on a non-rotating flat Earth? Okay, what's the deal with this? Of course they know we live on a flat Earth. And again, going back to August 1988. Now, the NASA deception, of course, goes back to the very beginning with the head of rocketry, the former Nazi Werner von Braun, and he has, of course, a Bible verse, Psalms 19:1. Take a look here at what it says, and that Bible verse. Again, the man head of rocketry, head of NASA. From, again, Psalms 19:1, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament shows his handiwork. Okay, the head of NASA's rocketry. It's 100% mockery. Basically, like I said so many times, everybody knows the Earth is flat, except the masses, except the general public. Everybody is basically on top of this world when it comes to NASA itself, the government. Of course, NASA being nothing more than a government agency. Hollywood, as you see here as well, when it comes to the concept of the flat Earth with this 1983 TV show called V for Visitors with these alien invaders. As I've shown this many times, when you get a close-up, this is the flat Earth model with the sun and the moon within the biblical flat Earth. And you see how the sun and moon, and you see the circular motion within. I mean, this is clear as day. There's no denying this, that this is the biblical flat Earth, and even the four corners as mentioned in the Bible itself. So again, as I show many times, this Bible verse, Revelation 12:9, where it states the great dragon, the old serpent called the devil, deceives the whole world. This is very literal. And even Christians, people that believe in God, do not understand this is 100% literal, not just empty words.
Jesus Christ! You believe in a supernatural being. Oh, my science.
Very clear once again to see all these occultic numbers. People are still going to deny this. Again, science is nothing more than a lie, a satanic lie from hell when it all comes down to it. Again, comes the photo of NASA and the supposed ball Earth. It's all from the Bible. talk about how they like to turn things upside down. As I stated so many times, these so-called elite know the Bible inside and out. So when you see the name Mickey for Mickey Mouse, you look at this reflection in this coffee cup. Let's take a closer look at this. This is how they conceived the name Mickey. Turn it upside down and it spells out wicked. This is how clever they are. The sick and twisted world of Walt Disney and Disneyland. People say Walt Disney's for children. It's a people trap set by a mouse. Just taking a look at Walt Disney's Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse, both MM for 33. So I mentioned before, why are the ears shaped like this? Not shaped round like this. So of course, as you can see here, it's the shape of a 3 turned sideways. It's basically coded for MM for 33 for Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse. You're going to lie to us in the news and tell us truth in the movies. Those that own and control this world control it all. And that definitely includes Hollywood. Taking a look at Small Soldiers, a 1998 Hollywood movie. Take a look at this image here with this kid Alan. In front of his computer monitor, he has a sign that says question reality. And what does it show? The ball Earth. How obvious can it be? All the videos I'm making about the flat Earth, you see this right in plain sight. Pretty unbelievable how the so-called elite love to mock us. They watch movies and have no clue what's taking place. Now taking a look at this scene here with the character Alan sleeping in his bed and the toy soldier comes to life. Interesting enough, he starts fiddling with his computer that said question reality, keeps clicking on the mouse, and let's take a look at this footage. As you just saw, a lot of the images flashed very fast across the computer screen. I captured many of the images. I'm going to show them, not in chronological order, but in order so people can connect the dots. First one here is explorers, pretty much in the beginning, people exploring this world. There is an image of Christopher Columbus. They also show Ferdinand Magellan, who supposedly circumvented the world, the first to circumvent the world in a boat. And like I said, supposedly. This is our fabricated history. Everything is a lie.
I'm lost, boss. What are we saying here?
There's a lot of smoke there, but there's some fire.
We're talking about our government here. No, we're talking about a crime, Bill, pure and simple. Y'all gotta start thinking on a different level, like the CIA does. Now, we're through the looking glass here, people. White is black, and black is white.
Getting on to topic of the moon and the moon landing, of course they're going to show this. One of the biggest hoaxes in history. Now I'm going to get onto the flat earth topic. Take a look at this image of Antarctica that flashed very briefly on the screen. Interesting enough, they show this image as well from Antarctica with all these flags and the dome. This is, of course, mockery. We live under a dome, as it states in the Bible. And this is from the New American Standard Bible, the one who built his upper chambers in heaven and has founded his vaulted dome over the earth. How obvious can it be? Everything we've been told is a lie. Everything has always been in plain sight, like I said so many times. Now let's take a look at this ancient Hebrew concept of the universe. I pointed this out before, and to briefly run through it. I get a lot of questions about asteroids. What about craters? Everything is within the firmament. When you get a crater, it's from falling stars. Nothing is beyond the firmament besides water and heaven above. And also, like I stated so many times, everything they tell us is the exact opposite. So if they tell you the sun is 93 million miles away, it's very distant when it actually it's close. This is the law of reversal. Same with the moon. When they tell us the moon is approximately 238,000 miles away, when it's all within the firmament, the dome.
The Lord tells me he can get me out of this mess, but he's pretty sure you're fucked.
Interesting enough, getting back to the images from Small Soldiers, they mention the Dome of the Rock and the occult of the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem. Just think about that name, the Dome of the Rock. This is the rock which represents the land we live on, the flat earth. And this is the dome above the rock. How this can be. Again, another image. Small Soldiers. Then we show the ball earth. As I showed earlier, there's actually a different clip where it says question reality. Just get a little bit of a close-up, and there you go. And they're teaching that we live on a ball earth. Why? Because NASA says so. Taking a look at this image, many people have seen this already. Nothing adds up. Specifically North America with these two images. Specifically from 2002 and 2012. Look at the size difference. Look at 1997 as well. You're going to tell me this Earth will rotate, be as large, North America will be as large as it's shown here? Give me a break. These are all composites, all fakery. Astronauts have never been in space. Never have, never will. They cannot get past the dome. Getting back to the movie aspect, as I've shown before, again, with all the Freemasons in the game, all the Hollywood directors, writers, and producers all on the same page. This is from the 1985 Back to the Future movie, the opening scene with all the clocks, and you can obviously see this is the flat earth model, just like the UN flag or the UN logo. As I showed before in a previous video, Bam Margera, with his movie called The Ming Hags, when you see it back on the chalkboard, you see the flat earth model, you get a close-up, and what does it say? Science 101. Again, just more mockery.
You probably know this guy. It's Captain Jean-Luc Picard from Star Trek. And maybe you even know this guy. This is Professor Calculus. But I guess you don't know that those two characters are inspired by a real person, a real scientist, Professor Auguste Piccard. This is a picture of him taken in 1932. I think he looks a little like Dirk Vriemaut, the first Belgian guy that went into space in 1992 at the age of 51. But this video is not about Dirk Vriemaut. This video is about a legit and real scientist. Auguste Piccard was a famous Swiss physicist, inventor and explorer. He did a lot of manned and unmanned hot air balloon flights to study Earth's upper atmosphere and cosmic rays. This was long before NASA existed. No one ever did experiments like that. He made big pressurized metal spheres to protect himself at high altitude. Massive hot air balloons took him over 10 miles into the sky, where he did different experiments. He painted one side of the sphere black, so that when it got too hot inside, they could rotate the black side towards the sun to make it colder again. A lot of things went wrong on the first trip. First of all, the German authorities tried to ban the flight because it was too dangerous. At the last minute they decided that helmets must be worn, so Professor Piccard improvised a little with materials he could find, which was fine for the Germans.
Now, just so people could say that I didn't get this off the internet, I did a little research. So I went on eBay and searched for Popular Science Magazine, 1931, August edition. I found one.
So, since I'm a flat earther, that makes this guy very interesting for me. I never knew about this guy. They never told me in school.
Why did we never hear that in our schools? I never heard of this man. Took an Illuminati commercial.
During takeoff, the motor that was designed to rotate the black side towards the sun got damaged. This means that the explorers experienced temperatures up to 40 degrees Celsius. Because of a valve problem, they could not descend when they wanted and the trip took many more hours. The press pronounced the explorers dead, but a few hours later they landed safely. They reached an altitude of 16 kilometers or 10 miles.
Before they decided they were going to lie to us, before they conspired worldwide to lie. Some people say that there are no scientists that are flat earthers. Well, guess what? He told you what he saw.
After many different balloon flights, a few years later Professor Picard started to build submarines to explore the depths of the oceans. Many others after him explored the atmosphere and also the ocean depths, including many members from his family, for example his son Jacques Picard. This shows me that long before NASA even existed, people used to explore these extreme places. I find it strange that so many of these explorers and even NASA astronauts do missions at both high altitude and deep below the ocean's surface.
Can I read this to you? It's on page 23. Now listen to this. The story of their adventure surpasses fiction. During the ascent, the aluminum ball began to leak. They plugged it desperately with Vaseline and cotton waste, stopping the leak. In the first half hour, the balloon shot up 9 miles through portholes, the observers saw the Earth through copper-colored, then bluish haze. Here's what he said. It seemed a flat disk with upturned edge. And just so you know, this is what I just read right here, where it says it seemed a flat disk with upturned edge.
My science bug.
Was about 6 months ago when we watched some videos and we knew we've been fooled a long time. So we did a little research and we learned about curvature. Now we know that standing water doesn't bend. We wanna know, have you ever seen a curve? We wanna know, have you ever seen a curve? When you're looking out across the earth. Listen up and don't you know, the sun is warm and the moon is cold. Come on, it's been that way for all our time. We're the center of the universe. Yeah, we don't move, it circles us. The flat earth, we don't live on a spinning ball. We wanna know, have you ever seen a curve? We wanna know.
It's a little like soap bubbles in a bathtub or in dishwashing detergent. The galaxies are on the surfaces of the bubbles.
This world is not what you think it is. This world is not what you think it is. Oh, oh. This world is not what you think it is. And by the hand that moves on a fingerprint.
Do you want to see some more NASA fakery? Do you want to see my bubble collection? Here is one. And here is another one. Ha ha ha. I meant space bubbles, Of course. Though, retard bubbles also are quite fascinating. Ha ha ha. Let's go.
Tiny bubbles and wine make me happy, make me feel fine. Tiny bubbles make me warm all over, with a feeling that I'm gonna love you till the end of time. So here's to the golden moon, and here's to the silver sea, and mostly here's a toast to you and me. Tiny bubbles,
Tiny bubble
and the wine, make me happy,
make me happy,
make me feel fine,
make me feel fine.
Tiny bubbles, make me warm all over, with a feeling that I'm gonna love you till the end of time.
Tiny bubble,
ooh, Ali,
and the wine, make me happy,
oh, holy,
make me feel fine. Tiny bubble,
make me warm all over, with a feeling that I'm gonna love you till the end of time. With a feeling that I'm gonna love you till the end of time.
A sea of nothing.
Fingertips, word is at my fingertips. Reefer in my cuticles, police want my fingerprints. Count the fucks I give on my left hand if I was fingerless. Middle finger shit, tell the hookah girl to break some tips. Fingerprints identical to what genius is. Blame my temper, I don't say it unless I mean the shit. What's the difference between the critics and the hypocrites? Same difference between Republicans and Democrats. Facts.
This world is not what you think it is. This world is not what you think it is. This world is not what you think it is. The hand that moves on the fingerprint.
When you're standing on the moon, the world doesn't look so big. Isn't it a beautiful planet? And full of different people and places. It's a pretty ball. Sort of a big blue marble.
Houston is go for docking. It's up to you guys. Have fun.
Scuba tanks in space? Snorkels and scuba tanks in space?
This world is not what you think it is. This world is not what you think it is. This world is not what you think it is. Am I the hand that moves on the fingerprint?
It's difficult to see, but just before he tosses the CubeSat satellite, a bubble pops out from where his thumb's at. It's a really tiny bubble. Walk from NASA isn't even a month old yet. And here's a bubble taking an odd trajectory because it's in a water pool. It even curves because the water is it's not motionless, it's moving.
He did the EVA. We just saw something flying out of
That's
the
like a paper.
stuff.
Paper.
It's a piece of paper?
Yeah, I think maybe it's the Snapchat.
And now he's just letting himself float. Because actually
I noticed there's quite a bundle of cables.
The exact word. It should be space float.
Yes.
They always treat you like a child, and they've stolen all your instincts to be wild. Maybe you swallowed all their lies, 'cause you opened up your ears and closed your eyes. So swim, little mermaid, sink or swim right up and look 'em in the eye. Swim, little mermaid, with your sword of truth. It's time to pierce the sky. It's not easy to believe the ones we all have trusted don't deceive. Maybe it's time to challenge life and see the whole world's been hypnotized. Swim, little mermaid, sink or swim right up and look 'em in the eye. Swim, little mermaid, with your sword of truth. It's time to pierce the sky. Today I woke up in a rage to find this life, this world is just a stage. Only the truth will set us free. So it's time for you to wake up just like me. Swim, little mermaid, sink or swim right up and look 'em in the eye. So swim, little mermaid, with your sword of truth. It's time to pierce the sky. With your sword of truth, it's time to pierce the sky. With your sword of truth, it's time to pierce the sky.
Okay, guys, what do we got left to do out here? Bay looks clean. Bay looks clean. looks clean.
他拍了一个画家，然后他就说直接说我到欧洲各个地方，就想给。
Look at the Earth's clouds. They're moving quickly here, and they suddenly speed up here. Watch it again. The entire Earth becomes covered in clouds in only 2 seconds.
protective plate over that location that will be flush to the over that location that will be flush to the surface.
This world is not what you think it is. This world is not what you think it is. Oh, oh, this world is not what you think it is. Am I the hand that moves on a fingerprint?
Fingertips, word is at my fingertips. Reefer in my cuticles, police want my fingerprints. Count the fucks I give on my left hand if I was fingerless. Middle finger shit, tell the hookah girl to break some tips. Fingerprints identical to what genius is. Blame my temper, I don't say it unless I mean the shit. What's the difference between the critics and the hypocrites? Same difference between Republicans and Democrats. Facts.
This world is not what you think it is. This world is not what you think it is. This world is not what you think it is. The hand that moves on the fingerprint. Oh, oh.
Why the cost of living so overpriced? Keep my lawyers on retainer like an overbite. When you the stoner type, a lot of weed be overhyped. Half a pound or more, a quarter won't suffice. You see what my composure's like? Been on the road for 40 nights, never make a hoe your wife, but these days hoe is life. Always got something in the air like poltergeist. There's your one, an activity, paranormal. I feel it in every corner, aroma of marijuana. By now this shit should be legal on every corner. That'll happen once they get profits off every grow of madness. I see Babylon and it's crashing. I'm asking why this was crafted. Who was the admin? The masses feel like we're captive in this contraption. I'm spazzing, I'm capping, stabbing. Salute the savage. Back.
In his hands, he's got the whole world in his hands.
Oh, oh, this world is not what you think it is. This world is not what you think it is. This world is not what you think it is. Am I the hand that moves on a fingerprint? The earth is flat.
Okay, so we've all seen the shadow of the Tom and Jerry where the mouse comes into the room and he scares the cat, but the cat looks at him and realizes it's a mouse. It's normal that objects cast shadows bigger than themselves the farther the shadow is from the object that's projecting the shadow. Here's an illustration of how that works. You have a light source, you have an object, in this case a sphere, and then you have a surface on which the shadow is cast. Now if you notice, when the object isn't right up against the surface, the shadow is bigger than the object. We've all seen this, and we can duplicate it ourselves easily. You can use a quarter, a ping pong paddle, headlights of your car, and a garage door. You see it in the real world all the time. Look at this picture here. The sun has swung around to our region. The light is being cast over the peak of this mountain, and look at the shadow. The farther away it is, the wider it gets, because that is how it works in nature. That's what's duplicatable. That's what can be demonstrated. And this is, notice that the shadow is never smaller than the object. But explain this. This is supposedly an image from space of an eclipse over Mexico. And if you look at a map, you can see that's 50 or maybe 60 miles across. Hard to say, but it's not a quarter the size of the Earth. But could the moon cast a shadow smaller than itself? Look at this illustration. If the ball is right up against the surface, the shadow is the exact same size. And if it gets farther away, the edges might become blurry, and the shadow can actually be bigger than the object, but it can't be smaller. So how can you explain that something 250,000 miles away, a quarter the size of the Earth, casts a shadow 50 miles across right there? And they could probably come up with some fantastical math to try to explain it, but even when you look at a chart that shows you where the eclipse is, look at the width of this band. I mean, look at the northwest part of it. If it went right over Salem, you couldn't even see a partial eclipse from Eugene or Portland. That's only about a 45-minute, maybe an hour drive. So that is maybe an hour and a half. But nonetheless, look at the size of the path. So when they show you this, don't you scratch your head for a minute and go, how is that possible? The shadow is the same size as the object in all scientific demonstrations. Now, when they show you one of their baloney illustrations and say, no, this is the magic. Look, the sun is so big it encompasses everything around it, and the light just kind of shoots itself up underneath the moon and makes a spot smaller than the moon. But actually, that is the exact opposite of what you really find in the real world. If the eclipse spot in this image was the light source, the shadow would be the size of the sun. It's the opposite. Look at the picture again. Light source, object, and shadow, which is bigger than the object unless the object is right up against the surface upon which it is casting the shadow. And we all know that light travels straight. If these two sticks were sundials, the light would have to be straight or your sundials would never be accurate. And yet, what they want to do is tell you that somehow, even though the sun's 93 million miles away from us and it's 92,750,000 miles away from the moon, it does this. That is a joke. This next image is from a University of Montana, and they tried to replicate what they claim happens with this model. On the right you have the Earth, then you have the moon, then they inserted a light diffuser, and that light diffuser is between the light source and the moon. So you can see that somehow the shadow is manipulated in such a way that it looks like it's a little bit smaller in the middle, a little hazy around the edge. And this is what they tell us that eclipses do. But in the real world, where's the diffuser? There's supposedly an Earth, a moon, empty space for 93 million miles, and then a light source. This is the exact same model without the diffuser. This is what really exists: the Earth and a moon and a light source. And notice that because the moon is not right up against the Earth, the shadow on the Earth there is bigger than the moon. So how does that work? That means that the path of an eclipse should be way bigger than what they're showing you in the official model. But when you look at a map like this, it shows you the bandwidth of the shadow, and it is very small. Even the actual images that aren't just a map like this will show you that the spot that the sun leaves is small. This is an official photo from NASA or a satellite of the shadow of an eclipse. This is the problem though. How do you take this? You have the Earth, 8,000 miles in diameter, about a little bigger, and you have the moon, which is 2,000 miles in diameter or bigger, 31 times the diameter of the Earth toward the sun, blocking the light. And they're telling us that we get this little spot. Now we know how shadows work. All you have to do is just play around with some light and an object. We know how the model of shadows work. The farther away the shadow is projected away from the object, the bigger it gets. But they tell you, you take this, and somehow miraculously, you get this. That's all I'm saying. Think that one over. Here's an interesting thing. We know that the moon is 2,000 miles in diameter and the Earth is about 8, so it's 4 times the size of the moon. And they claim in this model that this is how the eclipse is cast on the Earth by the moon. Okay, and it's smaller than the moon, which was my whole point. An object does not cast a shadow smaller than itself, but they say it does. Well, now look at this shadow that the Earth casts across the moon. We're 4 times bigger and the same distance away, but we cast a shadow 100 times larger. If you take two objects that are a 4-to-1 ratio and you hold them up against the wall with a bright light, you'll see that the shadows are proportional to their size. So how come the Earth is casting a shadow on the moon big enough to cover the entire moon, but the moon, which is 2,000 miles across, casts a shadow that covers Mexico City? That doesn't really make sense. So I don't claim to be an astrophysicist, but I can tell you, when I look at this, it really makes me scratch my head and say that something's not adding up. They can show you a conceptual model like this one here and try to explain it visually, and I suppose if you just take it at face value, that makes sense, but in actuality, the angles there are not represented because the distances aren't represented. Look at the arc of this shadow. That's supposed to be a lunar eclipse. That means that shadow would cover the Earth or the Moon 5 times. And yet, a 2,000 mile diameter moon casts this shadow on the Earth, which just barely covers one major city. I got a problem with that. And I just thought I'd point that out too, because it never came up in my last video. I was only bringing it up in the last video. The whole point was that if an object casts a shadow the same size as itself or bigger, then how is something 2,000 miles across casting such a small shadow? Well, then I'm going, okay, well, then it should be true the other way around. Why is the lunar eclipse 100 times bigger when the Earth is only 4 times the size of the moon? You got to think about that and try to make sense of that in your own mind. A 2,000 mile moon makes a shadow right there. I don't know how far that is, but it's right over Mexico City, so it's maybe 100 miles across. And they show you both models side by side in this illustration to explain it conceptually, but the distances are not represented. If the moon was 4 inches, the Earth would be 16 inches, and the sun would be 50 yards across, 550 yards away. That's not captured in this illustration. And I think those numbers, I recalled that right. It was off the top of my head, but that's a shrunk down model. So think it over yourself. How does the moon cast a shadow so much smaller than itself, but the Earth casts a shadow bigger than itself and covers the entire moon generously? Well, kick that around too. Put that in the equation and see how that affects the way you look at things. But I know that when we cover something that big and the moon only covers something that small, something ain't quite right. And one last thought on this image here. Wouldn't this image imply that if that moon wasn't in the way and you were on the Earth, the sun would look huge, bigger than the moon? The sun never looks bigger than the moon. This image is very misleading because it would suggest that if you just deleted the moon out of that picture, the sun would look bigger than the moon does. It doesn't. Look at time-lapse photography of the sun going across the sky and then look at the moon. They're the same size from our vantage point, whether there's an eclipse occurring or not. So think about that. Have a good day. Basically what they were talking about was how simple it is to see the situation if I had a brain, and that would be to just draw a line from the sun across the moon, and then from the moon on the other side also, and then I would see that, well, clearly the shadow cast by the moon would be smaller than the moon. So I started looking at that, and let me show you what it looked like to me. Tell me what you think. So look at what he said to draw that would make it so obvious. We have lines that go from the sun across the moon to the Earth. Small shadow. The problem with this is they show it on both models, incidentally. They show it on the solar and the lunar eclipses. But wouldn't this imply that the light is not parallel? If it's converging like that, that means it would eventually intersect. So let's get this straight. When science wants you to believe one thing, they'll show you intersecting light rays, but when they want you to believe something else they teach, they're only going to show you straight rays, like in this one. In the experiment that Eratosthenes did, the light had to be straight for it to work. If it wasn't straight, sundials wouldn't work. But they do, because light travels, it's radiation, it travels in a straight line. But they say, no, it actually converges and it would intersect. But every other scientific explanation about light behavior and discoveries show straight light rays. This is an excellent illustration here. Look at the light. Do they imply any convergence? Any light that would eventually intersect? Absolutely not. But they will show you anything that it takes to help you believe what they want you to believe. Whether there's truth in it or not, that's irrelevant. You have to start thinking for yourselves and look at this. Here again, the sun is depicted as having straight rays. They even showed that they're divergent in the left. They actually spread out as they radiate away from the light source. And when you look at the real world, This is how light works. Does this show any light that would converge? Any light that would intersect? This is what you see in the real world. Look at the clouds. You can Google sun in the clouds and you'll find tons of images like these. But when they want you to believe a certain thing, they'll show you a photo like this and say, no, this is how it works. The light will go around the moon and it will converge on the earth. And if the earth wasn't there, it would actually intersect, which means light isn't straight, which means every scientific experiment that relied on straight light rays is invalid. But what you have to remember is that the people that are controlling the world, they control the media, they control academia, they control science, they control history, and they happen to all have a Flat Earth logo on their agency. Well, you know, look. The Flat Earth map is on all their logos. They'll give you pictures from space and tell you that they're true. They'll lie to your face and say, here's some real pictures. And if you just scrutinize them a little bit, look at them yourselves. Satellite pictures, the cloud cover is frequently just pasted, sloppily even. And they'll ignore every other proof and want to argue over trivial details about the math or about you don't have this figured out. They ignore the fact that you can't find a curve. They ignore the fact that what you see with your own eyes tells you different. And they ridicule anyone who thinks out of the box and doesn't go along with the crowd and accept what they're taught. I mean, why would they, on one hand, just lie to you and say, look, light converges from its source. It doesn't radiate out. It doesn't spread out. It doesn't go in a straight line. Oh, well, wait, we want you to understand something else, so now we're going to show you that the light rays are straight and parallel. Everything they discover supposedly is more fantastical. Now we don't even have a plane of orbit. Now all the planets are chasing the sun through the universe. It doesn't matter. They're insulting your intelligence. They released this the other day and showed you a Jupiter with strudel on the top and said, wow, look what we have. What it really is that they don't want you to feel like you're anything. There is no purpose and you need them to lead you. We came from monkeys. We have no purpose. We're in a universe that's going no place, came from nothing, going nowhere, and we came from nothing and we are nothing. We're property, and they want us to feel like it. The last thing they want us to think is we came from something important, that we have value. Each person has to reconcile in their own mind what they're going to believe, but do you really need to cling to the teachings of people that are known liars? They won't tell you the truth for the life of them. You see it, it's election time. Listen to these people. The people that run the world are wicked. So would you expect that they would tell you the truth about science or about history? Do you think they're going to let their schools teach you something that contradicts things that mold your thinking the direction they want you to go? They won't. So think of the bigger picture. It's not about the shape of the planet or the earth or if it's flat or if it's round. It's about the value of life. And it's about, do you value truth?
Whilst
from
in
Mark
space,
Cameron. This is from Mark Cameron.
Whilst in space, have you ever looked away from Earth into the black void?
Yeah.
All
because
the
you can
time.
see.
Yeah,
Because you can see the stars.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
You know, and pretty much all the time you can see the stars.
We were never able to see stars from the lunar surface or on the daylight side of the moon. The sky is a deep black when viewed from the moon, as it is when viewed from cislunar space, the space between the Earth and the moon.
And we could not see stars
It's not a black void. I mean, it's black, but there's all kinds of little polka dots.
There's all the stars there, and the cool thing is about it, you can see it during the day.
And when you're in space and you're looking into deep space and you're on the sun side of the orbit, the sunlight washes out all the starlight, so you can't see any stars, just like here on Earth.
There's all the stars there, and the cool thing is about it, you can see it during the day.
Yeah, you can, and there's more than stars. You can see planets. You can see moons.
You see the gas Magellan clouds of the Milky Way
you see
galaxy.
The Magellanic.
The sunlight washes out all the starlight, so you can't see any stars, just like here on Earth.
Pretty much all the time you can see the stars.
Then when you look out into deep space away from the sun, it's the darkest black you can imagine.
Just the inherent beauty of it, the velvet, bottomless bucket of the universe.
In like just hanging there in a vast sea of darkness, and the most frightening darkness that you could ever imagine.
Pretty much all the time you can see the stars. From Mark Cameron. This is from Mark Cameron.
Whilst in space, have you ever looked away from Earth into the black void?
And the most frightening darkness that you could ever imagine.
Pretty much all the time you can see the stars.
The sky, of course, was black, but it had sort of a velvet sheen to it.
The biggest visual surprise was just how black the sky was. You have a brilliant sun, brighter than any sun you normally would see, even here in New Mexico. You have these extraordinarily high mountains. We were in a valley deeper than the Grand Canyon. But then you have this black sky, a sky blacker than black, as the old Vidicon expression used to be.
There's all the stars there, and the cool thing is about it, you can see it during the day.
I've often tried to explain the difference between darkness, when you turn out the lights and it's dark in here, or blackness. Blackness is the endlessness of it all. It's hard to comprehend.
Pretty much all the time you can see the stars.
We don't need no badges. I don't have to show you any stinking badges.
Whilst from Mark Cameron. This is from Mark Cameron.
Whilst in space, have you ever looked away from Earth into the black void?
Because you can see, because you can see the stars.
Oh yeah.
You know, and pretty much all the time you can see the stars.
We were never able to see stars from the lunar surface or on the daylight side of the moon. The sky is deep black when viewed from the moon, as it is when viewed from cislunar space, the space between the Earth and the moon.
And we could not see stars.
It's not a black void. I mean, it's black, but there's all kinds of little polka dots.
There's all the stars there, and the cool thing is about it, you can see it during the day.
And when you're in space and you're looking into deep space and you're on the sun side of the orbit, the sunlight washes out all the starlight, so you can't see any stars, just like here on Earth.
There's all the stars there, and the cool thing is about it, you can see it during the day.
Yeah, you can, and there's more than stars. You can see planets. You can see moons.
You see the gas Magellan clouds of the Milky
you
Way
see
galaxy.
The Magellanic.
The sunlight washes out all the starlight, so you can't see any stars, just like here on Earth.
Pretty much all the time you can see the stars.
Then when you look out into deep space away from the sun, it's the darkest black you can imagine.
Just the inherent beauty of it, the velvet, bottomless bucket of the universe.
In like just hanging there in a vast sea of darkness, and the most frightening darkness that you could ever imagine.
Pretty much all the time you can see the stars. From Mark Cameron. This is from Mark Cameron.
Whilst in space, have you ever looked away from Earth into the black void?
And the most frightening darkness that you could ever imagine.
Pretty much all the time you can see the stars.
The sky, of course, was black, but it had sort of a velvet sheen to it.
The biggest visual surprise was just how black the sky was. You have a brilliant sun, brighter than any sun you normally would see even here in New Mexico. You have these extraordinarily high mountains. We were in a valley deeper than the Grand Canyon. But then you have this black sky, a sky blacker than black, as the old Vidicon expression used to be.
There's all the stars there, and the cool thing is about it, you can see it during the day.
I've often tried to explain the difference between darkness, when you turn out the lights and it's dark in here, or blackness. Blackness is the endlessness of it all. It's hard to comprehend.
Pretty much all the time you can see the stars.
We don't need no badges. I don't have to show you any stinking badges.
Why? That is the question people ask me the most. Pourquoi? Why? For what? Why do you wake up this world? Why do you tempt faith? Why do you risk death? But I don't think of it this way. I never even say this word, death, la mort. Yes, okay, I said it once, so maybe 3 times just now, but watch, I will not say it again. Instead, I use the opposite word, love. For me, waking up this world, this is love. C'est la vie. My story begins with the world's most unbelievable deception. The spinning ball.
My name is Miranda, born in England, educated in the Netherlands, and now living in the countryside of France. About 3 years ago, my world started to turn inside out and upside down. It still is in a way. The change in how I see the world started when I was bored out of my mind and had absolutely nothing to do. With the intent to challenge my brain, I picked up a book and read a specific collection of poems. Yet quite quickly I found myself falling down a very deep rabbit hole. To continue reading and understanding these poems, I had to make a radical decision. Either these poems were telling the truth, or they were just a literary expression of someone's imagination. After a long while, I chose the first, for reasons I will not go into now. Yet for months I struggled with the idea if I was either absolutely mad, or if there really is a God, and I was being confronted with his omnipotence through the words I was reading. These poems have brought me to a completely new perspective on the perception of time, self-identity, and really everything my eyes can and cannot see. And I started to really look around me as if I had new eyes. I was in awe of what my senses were telling me. I saw the sun passing over my head, and saw the moon in her different states. And I wondered about these lights, and I asked myself if I knew what they really were. It was the moon that really challenged my thought process, because I could not figure out why her light made the night so cold, and why her light was so blue. How could this be if she was reflecting the sun's light that was so warm and yellow? And I looked at the pictures of Earth taken by NASA. And I wondered about them too, because I was seeing the blue marble each time, but with the same continents being different sizes on every one of them. The more I looked into what the space agency was telling the world, the more I started to doubt the scientific story about the Earth. And at the same time, I was still stumbling about with my belief and faith in God. I've always considered myself as my own compass, even though my needle often points in another direction than what is commonly accepted. Yet I am human too, and I needed confirmation that I was not the only one that had questions about what was presented as reality. I did find confirmation that I was not alone in my silliness. And because God had also made an unusual entrance into my life, I was reading the Bible as well. It was in this book that I found reasons to question the insignificant spinning oblate spheroid in the vacuum of space. So many verses in the Bible pointed me to look at the earth as a level plane that is stationary and, until Judgment Day, immovable. So for a long time I walked around feeling like a complete lunatic, at least in my own mind. I couldn't find anyone else that thought the way I did. Since the beginning of 2015, I have followed the numerous developments in this flat earth movement with great interest. Even though I do not know where the circuit of the earth begins or ends, and I do not know the shape and substance of the firmament above me, God has brought me to watch this movement unfold. A movement that has made me finally lose my garment of lunacy and help me continue my endless questioning of the earth I live in and the people of it. A movement of bold minds breaking free from the bonds of worldly deceptions into the truth that is God. And I must conclude, the Lord is my rock and my fortress and my deliverer, my God, my strength in whom I will trust, my buckler and the...
What difference does it make? Like I said, that's a great question. This is something that is not an easy answer because of the magnitude of what we're talking about here. How it will change your life, first of all, when you understand it, is dramatic, to say the least. Will it change you from having to go to your job every day and the things that you typically do every day? No. But when this knowledge becomes more mainstream and these agencies are starting to be held accountable, and you understand that they're all participating in this, not just the United States government, not just NASA, but China, Russia, India, all of them have space programs. They all have the same symbolism. They're all doing the exact same thing to their citizenry. And the first thing you have to understand about this is that the deception goes all the way to the top. And when I say all the way to the top, you have to kind of get rid of the notion that the people at the very highest levels are working together. The people that control the world are not we're not against each other. There was never any such thing really as the Cold War. We're really not enemies with anybody else. This is all a facade that's being brought on for our benefit. But the people that are in power, that have all the money, the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, the Morgans, the on and on and on, these are the people that literally run the central banking system, which of course has permeated the entire world. And any country that tries to get away from it, their leaders are quickly assassinated. It goes on and on and on. So you have to understand conspiracies a little bit to understand the magnitude of this deception. So why would they do this? Why are they trying to hide the fact that we are on an infinite plane or on a flat earth rather than a ball? Well, the answer to that, there's a lot of answers to that, but in my personal opinion, if you isolate people into the idea that they're on a blue marble that's in the middle of a universe that is really insignificant, and there's thousands or millions and billions of other worlds and possibly other civilizations, that makes most people think that we are insignificant and that we did actually come about as some sort of an accident. Now, when people believe that, their minds are much more malleable into being given the idea that there is no God, there is no creator, that all of this is just some sort of random happenstance. And because of that, that also gives the controllers this fertile soil to build other deceptions on. And it's all about control. Remember, it's not about money. Money is irrelevant. They print the money. Money is just something that you and I agree has value, but it really is just pieces of paper, right? These people are printing the money. They can print money all day long if they want to, and they do. So it's not about that, and it's not just about power either. It's about total control, mental, physical, spiritual, every way, shape, and form possible.
Now also consider this. Consider an airplane that begins to fly down south. Now we've seen videos and heard other people talk about how that plane would have to constantly be correcting its altitude and pushing its nose downward in order to stay level with the earth. Well, if it did that, by the time it got down here, it's upside down. The pilot would be flying upside down. That is a very, very simple truth. So if you presented a globe to a child who'd never been indoctrinated in the ways of men, do you think a child would believe that they live on a globe? How could that possibly make sense? It doesn't make sense. I think this is the simplest proof that we can offer people.
Number one, to come into the truth movement, if you're really concerned about truth, You've got to check an ego at the door, okay? You do not know everything. A lot of you think you do, but you don't. I certainly don't. Through your school system, through your education that you're so proud of, that builds your whole ego, your whole value in life, it's impossible for you to discard it and admit you were deceived. Let me tell you something. You've been deceived. It's not your fault. You can let go of your ego. Nobody's gonna laugh at you except other people that can't let go of their ego. But the one thing they fear is 300 million people in the United States coming together on one topic and saying, this makes no sense. We need answers. Why is the flat earth so important? Because it shows the deception. There are enough reasonable questions to create reasonable suspicion that we've been lied to. They can't afford to keep being asked. Whether the earth actually turned out to be diamond-shaped, cross-shaped, pear-shaped, there's enough to see that it's not what we've been told. And once that is revealed, everything these governments have done becomes illegitimate. That is why it matters. And that is why they will do anything they can to keep us fighting, keep us distracted, keep us at odds against each other, just like the entire world. Government that truly has your best interest, your freedom at heart? Or does it sound like a government that wants to keep you constantly busy on paying attention to anything but what they're doing? And this truth movement is no different. Because as soon as the topic starts going where everybody could actually make a stand and say, hey, wait a minute, this needs to be answered. This is a big one. And I don't care what anybody says, the flat earth, the shape of the earth, is the biggest conspiracy and has been used to manipulate, deceive, and control us all. Flat earth is not a psyop. Flat earth destroys the psyop. Every psyop that's been used to control us for as long as they've known about it. So this system has been in power and control for hundreds of years, ever since they convinced the rest of the world that they didn't know where they live, and created this fantastical scenario to make people feel insignificant and to follow those that appear to know better, that are just better liars, deceivers, that have no conscience, and will do everything and anything to everybody and anybody they can to keep that power. Because people are waking up. And no matter how much they try to suppress this flat earth movement, oh, it's gonna keep moving one way or another. You can see it. People are waking up. So now, louder than ever, I can hear that clock. Tick-tock, 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 tick-tock. The control system. They have to keep indoctrinating you in schools, teaching you about everything and anything but where you live. Now they have to treat out all the money that was going into the educational system to control your mind isn't working anymore. People see how stupid everybody is. That is the failure of government. See, Flat Earth proves the failure of government, period. Because it's either deceived and lied and indoctrinated us all into a false system, or it's completely failed in making people realize if they really live on a globe, a lot of people don't see it. So your education system has failed now, hasn't it? In order to believe it, we've got to believe a bunch of math formulas that only a few people in the world can supposedly understand, and we've just got to take your word for it. Here in this age of all this technology where I can get on this phone, record this video, and send it out to the world, they can't seem to find a way to easily, simply prove to everybody on the planet where they live. It always depends on some formulas that the majority of the people don't understand. And again, the people that do understand it don't understand it. They either that know it's bullshit or they believe it's bullshit because it's just religion and it's to fit their agenda. It doesn't wash out in reality. What difference does it make? What difference does it make? Yeah, that's their favorite line. Got a lot of people, what difference does it make? You can't figure out what difference it makes? If you can't figure out what difference it makes that the people running your world have fucking lied to you over and over your whole life, if you can't figure out that someone lying to you is trying to control you, why am I having to explain this to critical thinkers in the truth movement? Where you live, it's been a lie the whole time. And if everybody would just come together and demand answers, they would be in checkmate. They would not know what the fuck to do. They cannot prove it. They can't prove the globe because it doesn't exist.
And so these bad magicians stage all this fakery because my love for you began from the day that I was born. And I've been lied to ever since.
You see, Pinocchio, a lie keeps growing and growing until it's as plain as the nose on your face.
One of the saddest lessons of history is this. If we've been lied to long enough, we tend to reject any evidence of the lie. We're no longer interested in finding out the truth. The lie has now captured us. It's simply too painful to acknowledge, even to ourselves, that we have now been taken. Once you give a lie a power over you, you almost never get it back.
You have to remember how big of a conspiracy this is. This isn't talking about just the JFK thing or isn't talking about just 9/11. It's on an umbrella kind of system to where it is the biggest deception that there is. It actually exposes every other deception, and nothing else brings down the power of the elite because it really exposes education, science, the economy, television, museums, universities. Think of all the things that have been fooled. I feel worse for the people that are out there building satellites, the people that are out there actually working for these space agencies, the people out there teaching in schools as professors, because they would all come to the conclusion eventually, once this gets out, that they've all been contributing to the lie. And that's got to be the worst feeling that there is. And that's why you have a hard time with a Neil deGrasse or a Bill Nye, these guys ever even considering that the Earth might not be what they were taught, because they understand if it's not, then their entire lives have been about promoting the lie. They are tool pieces for the elite, for the lie system, and it really destroys everything. And I'm a perfect example, John, of what you were talking about. When I realized religion had some things in it that didn't quite fit with my reality and I was done with it, I realized there was many lies there. I popped out of that, and the one place that's there with open arms, calling for you, saying, we tell nothing but the truth, we're all about facts and evidence, is science. And I went there with my arms open, ready to embrace them, and said, oh, thank you. I'm so glad you're here, because over there I was just getting lied to left and right. And now I know science is the place to go. Now, thank goodness I'm into research and things that I wanted to know everything about it. I wasn't comfortable in just saying, well, now I realize religion's a lie. I'm just going to be scientific and promote science and just say the word science when anybody talks to me. It would have been really easy. I could have paraded myself around and been really Mr. Smart Guy and been able to debate Christians, and would have been really easy for me. But instead, I decided to look into it. I wanted to know, why is evolution real? Where is the evidence? Why are these things facts? How do they know the age of the Earth? And the more and more I looked into it, and the more I asked these so-called science backers, the more I realized it was another religion. And that's ultimately, and I'll admit it, an atheist for probably 6 months. And thank goodness I looked into that science. But I notice out there all these other guys who are just making these debunk videos or calling us crazy. The difference between me and them is that they don't want to research it, or they don't know how to research past the deception layer. I mean, you have to understand, this is the biggest deception ever. It can never be let out. So if you're looking for, well, why does Jaron say this? And you go look up Google or something like that, and you just search it one time and don't try and look at any other sources besides the mainstream sources, then you shouldn't be surprised that you're going to get the exact answer you're looking for. That's only going to confirm what the elitists, or what these people who are fooling us from the top down, what they want you to find. And then they go and make videos claiming these are evidence that we're wrong. And they say, well, these guys didn't even research it. If they would have looked it up one time, they would have found it. That's crazy talk. If you think we don't know the mainstream reasoning behind it, that we don't need to bring that up to people, because anybody like you can go look it up and find that exact answer. That's not doing research. And this is a deception on the highest level that you need to go and dig deeper and look at different bits and pieces and put it together and come up with your own explanation. Because if you're just going to take what mainstream tells you and believe it, then go watch Fox News and enjoy what the mainstream wants you to enjoy. That's the way that they operate. So I just think when it comes down to people asking, how does it affect my life? No, I guess it depends on you. If you don't care that you've been lied to about everything, from school, from kindergarten on, everything that you were taught in school was meant to get your mind into a certain frame of reference, to make you think about the world a certain way, to make you think about your parents, and make you think about your friends, and to make you think about your government, all in a prescribed way to make the rich get richer and make you into a wage slave. If you don't care that that happened, if you're happy going to your 9-to-5 job and you're comfortable in your belief about who your creator is, then it doesn't affect your life. For a lot of us, that is a pretty big deal. For me, it looks like 35 years of my life was completely wasted on a false existence that someone else decided to sell me. You know, I'm going to spend the rest of my life exposing it, because I don't think it's right. It's not the way you treat other people. It's not the way you treat other beings. We all have a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And somebody just said that. They told us that, but then behind the scenes, they made sure that they kept us unhappy and that we weren't free, and that they were the ones who got to enjoy the good life while we worked for them.
Can you see the miracles around you? Everything was created for our benefit. Microscopic organisms that engulf every living thing on the earth was created just for us. That, my friends, is a love that's amazing and unconditional. Have you noticed the miracles around you? Our earth is not an accident. We are not an accident. Who are these people who have kept this from us? What are they? We have taken our first huge step to break away from the programming. We have thrown all that we've been taught out the window to finally take our discernment back from all of men's scientific and religious indoctrinations. As we rid of the layers of concepts of science and religion, we begin to understand what it means to abide by our spirit of discernment, for it is ours from birth. We know right from wrong. We know righteousness. We are beginning to peel layer after layer of worthless concepts of science and religion that have kept us blinded from the truth, to finally see glimmers of light. We are taking our blindfolds off and coming out of the darkness. A new era has begun because everything we knew is obsolete. We are taking our first steps, and we will no longer rely on the deceivers, because we will discern the truth from now on. Can you see the miracles? Do you realize what this means? We are unique. We are family. We are humanity. And we are coming together. We will no longer be divided, because we know what divides us: science and religion. The age of deception is over.
So ultimately, to get back to the question, how will it change your daily life? Well, until it's actually exposed, not a whole lot, because we're still slaves to this very same system. We still have to go to our jobs, we still have to pay the bills, yada, yada, yada. However, think about when this idea catches on and the awareness of the level of deception that we are kept under. And I think a lot of people are waking up to it. 9/11, being the fraud that it is, Sandy Hook being a fraud, on and on and on. But at some point, we're hoping that this is going to hit critical mass. And when it does, then all of a sudden, these institutions that are taking billions and trillions of dollars from us to simply enslave us, to keep us going to work every day and never having enough money or time, and other countries that are starving, have no medical attention. And in fact, there's active campaigns to kill these people off, and this is a well-known agenda. But all this aside, when this all goes away, then we're talking about an entirely different world. Then we're talking about the kind of world that would be, I dare say, more utopian. And that isn't always necessarily a good thing either, but let's just say that it would be a whole lot better than what we have now. If people understood that we are special, that there is a creator, and that really, when people come to this realization, we will start becoming more aware of the value of other humans and human life. And we don't look at people as, well, just because they're different from us, then they're wrong and they're funny and they're weird. We see each other as brothers, and we see each other as related in family, and we start respecting each other on a level that is due to everyone. And when that happens and we get rid of the governments that are enslaving us and the people above the governments that are controlling them, then all of a sudden we start looking at a society where we can start improving upon ourselves. We can start making our own technologies that will benefit humanity instead of the elite usurping all these technologies and using it for themselves against us. Like we can have unlimited free power and there's just so many things. I mean, you could go on and on and on and on about this, and many people have researched this. But at that point, everything changes. Absolutely everything changes, because we no longer are living in a slave world. We're living in a truly free world where everybody is sovereign and everybody has much more respect for other selves, other people. So that's pretty much the answer to that question. So it is a big thing. It really is. You can't just brush it off as saying, what difference does it make? It's not going to change anything. Au contraire, not only will it change things, it will change things in it'll bring us to an entirely new paradigm, an entirely new way of life.
This is how we will reach the stars. Stars, stars, stars. Are you ready to put on your spacesuit? Strap in for the G-force liftoff. Countdown is getting very close now to the adventure of a lifetime.
We should go boldly where man has not gone before. Fly by the comets, visit asteroids, visit the moon of Mars. There's a monolith there, a very unusual structure on this little potato-shaped object that goes around Mars once in 7 hours. When people find out about that, they're going to say, who put that there? Who put that there? Well, the universe put it there. If you choose, God put it there.
Why attempt the impossible? Why follow your dream? But I cannot answer this question why, not with words, but I can show you how it happened.
The Earth is flat.
This what?
The Earth is flat. Okay.